Shinran encompasses his entire Buddhist way in the concept of Amida's directing of virtue to sentient beings. In this, we see clearly manifest a unique characteristic of Shinran's thought not found even in Honen. We must consider, then, how he arrived at this concept. Shinran received the teaching of, quote, attainment of Buddhahood through the Nembutsu, close quote, from Honen. The act that results in birth, that is, Buddhahood, is the Nembutsu, or Namu Amida Butsu. And further, this Nembutsu is not merely saying the name, but Nembutsu based on the primal vow. The Nembutsu is not based on a person's own efforts and devices. Rather, it is the practice that is, quote, non-directing virtue on the part of beings. From the opposite viewpoint, it is other power, the directing of virtue to us through the primal vow. For all those who aspire to attain Buddhahood, whether sage or foolish person, the Nembutsu directed to us through the power of the primal vow is the sole path to Buddhahood. Hence it is called the One Vehicle. Quote, the One Vehicle is the vehicle of highest truth. There is no one vehicle other than the one Buddha vehicle, the vow, close quote. All beings are led ultimately to take refuge in the one Buddha vehicle of the vow through true and real practice and Shinjin. While the 18th vow is at the center of the primal vow, setting forth the way by which all beings can attain birth in the Pure Land through saying the name, the 17th vow expresses the significance of the name as manifested in the praise of all the Buddhas. Shinran states, quote, that the name spreads universally throughout the worlds in the 10 quarters is due to the fulfillment of the vow embodying the ocean of the one vehicle wisdom, the 17th vow of Bodhisattva Dharmakara's 48 great vows, which states, my name shall be praised and pronounced by the countless Buddhas in the 10 quarters. Close quote. The name embodies all Amida's activity. Working to bring sentient beings to entrust themselves to the vow, it becomes Shinjin in them and manifests itself as the utterance of the Nembutsu. In speaking of attaining practice, realization of Shinjin is always implied, for great practice is directed to us by Amida. Without the realization of Shinjin, or the mind of Amida, it is impossible for us to manifest the Nembutsu that is great practice. Since one reaches a point that transcends birth and death, one greatly rejoices. The person who takes refuge in the Nembutsu, in whom the true practice in Shinjin has been realized, is grasped by the power of Amida's vow, and once this takes place, he is never abandoned. He will unfailingly attain nirvana and become Supreme Buddha. Thus, quote, we should reverently entrust ourselves to this practice and Shinjin. We should single-heartedly practice it. Close quote. Shinran takes up the one utterance of practice and the one thought moment of Shinjin. The one utterance of practice is a single voicing of Namu Amida Butsu. But one here is not primarily a numerical one, in contrast to many, or among many. It means wholehearted or exclusive. One utterance or thought moment signifies wholehearted thought, exclusive utterance. Among Honen's followers, the question of whether one utterance was sufficient to bring about birth or whether many utterances were necessary was widely debated. For Shinran, however, it is not a question of number. However many or few times one says the name, the problem is whether one's utterance is, quote, based on the Buddha's primal vow or not. In his terms, whether it is the power of the primal vow directed to one or not. One signifies the ultimacy of the easy practice selected by Bodhisattva Dharmakara. Further, the one thought moment of Shinjin, quote, reveals the ultimate brevity of the instant of the realization of Shinjin. This is not a unit of time, but time at its ultimate limit, time as the flow of birth and death reaches its limit, entering and fusing with the eternal, the ocean of the vow of the Buddha of immeasurable light and life. In this moment, one, quote, attains practice and Shinjin. Therefore, to attain true and real practice in Shinjin is, quote, to immediately enter the stage of the definitely settled, or, quote, group of the truly settled. Thus, great practice and great Shinjin are established together. Realization of Shinjin is included in Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu is the saying of the name as great practice, which is attained by the Nembutsu practicer as practice and Shinjin. Honen, after long years of arduous study and rigorous practice, left the path of sages, casting aside the various practices. Abandoning almost all of the Buddhist tradition, he took up only a single element and thereby established the Nembutsu of the primal vow. As we have seen, Shinran received this teaching of the Nembutsu as great practice. Since in Namo Amida Butsu he was able to attain Buddhahood, to be fully realized through the working of the vow, toward the end of the section on great practice he states, quote, when one has boarded the ship of the vow of great compassion, the darkness of ignorance is immediately broken through, and quickly reaching the land of immeasurable light, one realizes great nirvana and acts in accord with the virtue of Samantabhadra. Close quote. The virtue of Samantabhadra refers to the compassionate activity of all bodhisattvas. Thus, Shinran speaks here even of returning to this world in performance of a bodhisattva's work. The Nembutsu has the power to bring us to attainment of Buddhahood because this is based on the Buddha's primal vow. Where such a standpoint is made thoroughly consistent, a person's own power is reduced to nothing. Among Honen's followers, we find a strong tendency for the Nembutsu as a practice of self-power to remain. Saikaku, for example, states, quote, practicers recite the Nembutsu day and night, and the merit increases more and more, and the cause for birth becomes even more determined. Close quote. Here, the value of human endeavor is still recognized, and the possibility of making birth more definite through one's own powers is admitted. For Shinran, however, settlement of birth comes about through Amida's directing of virtue through the power of the primal vow. Once settled, it is absolute and unchanging. Thus, one attains the stage of non-retrogression through the realization of Shinjin. Inheriting the position of Shantao and Honen, that the power of the Nembutsu is, quote, based on the Buddha's primal vow, close quote, Shinran brought the Nembutsu teaching to its fullest development in his concept of Amida's directing of virtue. In Shinran, the power of the vow is absolute, and there is nothing whatever of his own power. This is to, quote, overturn and discard the mind of self-power, close quote. The mind, called Shinjin, indicating the wisdom compassion of Amida, is wholly received from the Buddha, and on the side of the practicer, such a mind is completely absent. Here, the concept of Amida's directing virtue through the power of the vow arises naturally. A scriptural passage states, quote, attainment of Buddhahood through the Nembutsu is the true essence of the teaching, close quote. For Shinran, this means that the entire Pure Land Way is established upon Amida's directing of virtue.